So now we move on to another stage of our mixing process. So we've looked at the EQ, we've looked at a bit of saturation, we've got some vibe into the sound. The only difference we're going to have now is that a lot of these stems, compared to our reference, don't have any effects on. So for instance, if we listen to the reference track here, you'll hear that on the instrument parts, on the saxophone parts especially, there's quite a lot of effects like reverb. So let's have a listen. So in there, you've got quite a lot of reverb. If we just listen to our instrument group now, you'll hear that there is no effects whatsoever. So here, we're already missing some kind of flavor. So this is a good time to think about putting effects in. Now, just as looking at the EQ and looking at the saturation, we could have easily gone into the individual parts and individual sounds and added various parts to these, added various effects to them. However, we're dealing with a top-down efficient workflow here. So we're going to look at adding our effects in as buses to the groups. Now, luckily here, I managed to make sure that the instrument track is the instrument track 1. If we look at our instruments here, instrument track 1 are the saxophones. So instrument bus 1 is just the saxophones. Instrument bus 2 is the pads and strings, and instrument bus 3 is the chords and sort of blips. So I know that instrument 1 here is saxophone. So let me just name that, so it's a bit more understanding. So we've got a saxophone bus here, which is going to mix C. What I can do now is just play this through and add in some reverb to this. So let's mute our other instrument buses. So it sounds, it's a nice recording, but it's nowhere near as powerful as the original reference track because it doesn't have an environment. It's just a very dry saxophone recording. What we have here, what we set up earlier, is our reverb 1 and reverb 2. So if we remember, we've got the EMT, which is a classic plate, and then we have this other one, which is called the black hole, which is more of a sort of out there secondary reverb. Now, the reason there is 2 of these, and I did say I'd mention further on into this course, the reason I have 2, this one is the classic area, is the room sound. It's the sound on top of the sound, the environment given to the sound. The second reverb can be added in to add more atmosphere around that sound. So this has got more of a tail. It starts a little bit later, which we can add into here, but it just generally is the tail of the original first reverb. It's quite hard to understand and explain without listening. So I'll show what I mean here. So the first thing we're going to do is go to our sax bus. We'll go to the sends, and I'm going to pick from my bus menu reverb 1. I'm going to put this instantly to 0, and then we're going to see what it sounds like at 0, so sending full amount. This may be too much, but this is the beauty of having a send effect. So let's have a listen and see what we can get. So it doesn't sound too bad. I've just gone in and solo safed those reverbs so I don't have to keep soloing them. I mean, it's a very nice tone to it. The only thing is it's lasting a little bit too long. So we're going to pull this timing down for this one a little bit. There we go. I just want it to be the environment. I want it to be the space of which the recording was done in, not necessarily the atmosphere that's around it. I'm also going to go into the EQ here and just slightly EQ this. So turn the EQ on. We're going to go from around about, if this is 20 Hertz and this is 2K, this looks like it would be around about, say, the 800, 600 mark, something like that. And we're going to pull down the volume of that. There we go, it's pretty nice. Maybe get away with a little bit longer now. There we go, it's kind of nice. Make sure the pre-delay is on 0. Now this doesn't last for very long. In the context of the rest of the track, let's have a listen to this with the bass and vocals. So it's good enough to put it into a space, but that space doesn't have that much of a tail to it. This is where the second reverb comes in. So if I go to my bus, sends, go to reverb 2. This one, there's no way I'm going to leave it at 0. I'm going to be slowly putting this up just to give in a little bit more of this. Now, our pre-delay for this is going to be around about sort of, we can time it by listening. So let's have a listen and see what we can get. See that added tail, that added environment. So without it, the first reverb only, that's the first reverb. Second reverb only. See the difference between the two. The first reverb is a lot closer. It's a lot more around the sound, whereas the second reverb is more of an ambience, which sort of takes up the rest of the space and just comes in slowly afterwards. So the two together. Let's have a listen to the whole track together now with all of the other instruments in. And see, when I stop, you get that beautiful tail. So let's go to a different section of the track here, see if we can find a part that it's going to break out from and see what we can get. So let's go down to the saxophones actually, and see when the sax is end. Let me see what we get from here. So see if we can get like a nice tail ending. You can take me down, I'll take you. I hold you down, I hold you down. So you get so much more of a tail off the end of that, and it just nicely moves and transitions into that breakdown. It's these subtle little things. Again, we've used two reverbs here, but we've got so much more out of them just by having them on sends and deciding how much we want of each and where those reverbs are going to sit. They both have different directions. Reverb 1, the plate reverb, is more defining the initial sound of the recording, so like where it's recorded in, and reverb 2 is more of an effect, so it's more of an atmosphere that's added around the sound itself. You can take me down, I'll take you. I hold you down, I hold you down. I hold you down, I hold you down. And see now the vocals, even though they've got reverb on, it might work if we were to put reverb 2 on the vocals as well, just a little touch to add a little bit more cohesion with those saxophones and instruments. You can take me down, I'll take you. You can take me down. So all we're adding is that extra cloud underneath. You can take me down, I'll take you. So without it. You can take me down, I'll take you. And then it ends with the reverb. You can take me down, I'll take you. You just get that extended tail underneath, which is kind of nice for this. Again, it adds a little bit more space, a little bit more distance with the vocal from the rest of the parts. You can take me down. So just going back there, listening to the reference track, then listening to this one, there's a little bit more sizzle in the reference track on those percussive parts. Remember, we haven't touched any of the mix bus yet, but we're going to be adding probably a lot more presence to the overall mix. But just to get that balance, I'm liking the tone of the mix, but of the reference mix, but the width of it, everything kind of sounds a little bit static. We want a little bit more movement, a little bit more space between the parts, which I think we're achieving so far in this mix. So let's listen to the reference again. You can take me down, I'll take you. I hold you down, I hold you down. So yeah, and the vocals will sound a little bit more spaced out. It's just a little bit clearer. And then adding in, just by listening to it, going back one stage and just looking at that EQ of the drums as a whole, so not necessarily individual parts in the individual drum elements. We've gone to the group and we've added a shelf here around about 2.5K by around about 2 decibels. So nothing too drastic, but just enough to push that presence in the drums through a little bit more. But in terms of the effects of this track, most of the effects in a top-down mix at this stage are going to be done as parallel effects, so things like reverbs, delays. The next thing we can look at is more delays or parallel parts or modulation effects, but this is then again completely up to you. One good thing you can add in for drums is parallel compression. So for instance, if I take the drums here as a solo and then grab our parallel bus, which at the moment is set up with this 1176. See how much more extra addition you get to it. So let's play it with the rest of the track. Let's mute this and then bring it back in. So again, one compressor that fits all. It's all on a parallel bus. So this could be added into the vocals. This could be put underneath the bass. This could be added into those saxophones. Let me just go to a different section of the track. Let's go back to about here. Go back, listen to the reference. See how much more open space we're getting to it. We're getting more into that area of the punch of the original mix, but then we're keeping the integrity of the warmth and the space in our new mix. Let's just go back and listen to those effects for a second. See these effects here, they're kind of nice, but they could probably do with a lot more atmosphere around them. This is where our Reverb 2 would come into play. So let's just bring this in slightly. Sounds pretty nice. Let's try some of this modulation bus, which is basically a chorusing effect. Let's add some of this bus in. There we go. So now we've got added width. So let's play these two without, and then with on the drop. Just a little bit more sizzle and a little bit more power and width to those effects. So let's listen to the reference again. It's not bad. Let's listen to our mix version so far. You can see here we've not added any other effects that weren't there in before our template. So we've just still used the 2 reverbs. We haven't touched the delays yet. We've got 1 parallel compressor and 1 chorus plugin. But then the way that we've arrayed them within our various groups gives the track everything that it needs. And again, we've still, if I go back to the tracks here, every single track that's in here, in our drums, there is not a plugin. On our bass, there is no plugins. On our vocal groups, there is nothing. No EQs, no plugins, no nothing. Because this isn't the stage where we should be wasting time on stuff like that if it doesn't need to be done. We can work and get what we can on our groups, top-down idea, and then at the end of this, when we've finished all of our structure and we don't think we can add anything else or make any more changes, we can then listen out to the things that are a problem. Say the snare drum isn't kicking as good as it should be. We can go back and just alter that instead of altering everything for the sake of it.